Welcome to another edition of Ignite Agility. Today I have Jessica Temple with me.
Hello.
Hey, Jessica, good to see you.
Good to see you too. Happy Friday.
Well, and as I told you, for me, it is Happy Friday, but it's new Ted Lasso episode day.
Oh, so even better. It's
That's what we call
day.
it around here. So yes, that's just what we've taken to calling it. So I really appreciate you taking this time because you and I connected in my Certified Scrum Professional Scrum Master program, which you passed. So you are now officially a CSP, and really like-minded in a lot of things, or just really great conversation. So I appreciate you coming by today to share your thoughts with me on what the hell has happened to our Scrum.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about this. It's been a growing frustration for me as well. So
yeah, it's almost like the simplicity of Scrum is too much for people to handle. So it's like, no, let's add sprint zero. And no, the Scrum Master can't possibly be a full-time role. We've got to time slice that person into doing all these other things. And they must be the Jira administrator, right? And they take all the notes, right? And
you're a secretary, you're an admin assistant, right? You're here to remove obstacles. Well, I don't want to do the documentation. I don't want to do that work. So you can do it for me. How about that?
Yeah. How about no?
No.
Yes. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I feel like it's female Scrum practitioners and Scrum masters such as you and I who face that assumption more so. It's like, aren't you just gonna take that down for me?
Absolutely. I can't tell you the number of times I've sat in meetings and be like, so Jessica, you're taking notes, right? Well, no, I wasn't going to, but I guess I am now. Is there nobody else capable of writing? Or, oh, we really need a meeting for that. Jessica, can you get everybody there? Can you schedule that meeting for me? Can you find time on my calendar? Yes. And it becomes a very, you need to be able to remove obstacles, but everybody is an adult and we need to learn to schedule our own meetings and, write stuff down ourselves. And it can't just be that you're relying on your Scrum Master to handle all the things that you don't want to do. And that's what I've seen a lot.
Irony is the new Scrum Guide uses the word accountability all over the place, which I love. But leaders in those organizations will say, well, we need higher accountability. Stop expecting them to have adult daycare providers then.
I've told pretty much every team I've been on, I already have a 4-year-old. I don't need any more. And I will not be putting your socks and shoes on for you. I do that every morning, right? I don't, we're all adults here. You expect me to be adults in the way that I work with you. So how about you handle your own business as well? So, and generally people kind of laugh and they go, oh, you're right. I don't need another mother. And you're like, okay, good. We're on the same page then.
Good. And I think, a lot of it is this bad Scrum mastery that perpetuates some of it. And in defense of people who are potentially those bad actors, they may not know any better. Or it's this sensationalization or this big business that Agile and Scrum has become for a lot of organizations, because there are no shortage of companies just, you can be Agile in these 12 steps or take this pill or buy this program. And it doesn't resemble Scrum at all, but an organization buys into it, just because it's got the word Agile on it.
Right. Or I'm going to turn you into, I think, product is the new one, right? I've sat in a number of trainings where it's, well, you need to be product focused. You need to be this. And I think, there's so much lack of clarity if you're not a Scrum Master, because this role really hasn't existed before, I don't think, right? Because it's either you had project managers or you had coaches that were consultants that would come in for a very short period of time. And so I don't think organizations know how to deal with a position where it's literally your job to change things. Right. I heard something the other day that corporations are built to adhere to the status quo, right? They automatically go against change because what they're doing is working and making them money. And so as a Scrum Master, literally it's our job to be a change agent. We should be challenging things constantly. We should be bringing up the conflict. We should be pointing things out about how we all can get better. And I think that people don't know how to deal with that. They don't know how to conceptualize that position. So instead it becomes, well, I'm familiar with somebody that'll take my notes for me, or I'm familiar with a project manager. And so they don't even mean to, but they just step into what they're comfortable with and what they know. And that's where, like you're talking about the over marketization, it just becomes where, oh, well, if we do these 5 things and I have the position of Scrum Master, then it's good, instead of taking a step back and saying, well, what does that coaching position really look like? What does that actually mean, instead of just giving somebody the title and, handing them a whiteboard pen, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
expecting them to write everything down. So I think I've seen companies really challenged with well, I read the book, so now I understand. And I have not read one book that has taught me more than everyday experience
Right.
and working hard and seeing how teams actually work together.
Experience is experience. It's the best teacher.
Mhm.
And people will say, well, how do you know this stuff? You seem to just know this stuff. Or you've been doing this for 16 years. I'm like, yeah, in the first 2 years, I would go back and kick my own ass if I could. But
Every day I look back and I'm just like, oh,
but
that
I
is
can't.
embarrassing. Like, I feel bad. I just like call those people. I'm like, I'm sorry.
Right.
Just forgive me for as I was learning early.
Mhm. First attempt in learning. And so
Exactly.
it's really this mindset. And, people are going to get there when they get there. And the only way to do that, you mentioned having your 4-year-old, hey, stay away from the stove, it's hot. Hey, stay away from the stove, it's hot. They learn what hot means when
They touch it. Right.
So it's like we don't have these epiphanies about Scrum or about the agile values or principles until, oh, that's what it is. I get it now, until it smacks you in the face or you touch that stove or make that mistake. And now we get it.
Yeah. I mean, just like we say, we always want to understand our customers' pain points and what our customers are going through. Well, with Agile, we're kind of our own customers, right? We need to constantly be going, what are our pain points? Take a step back and say, what are we not delivering that we could be delivering? Where are we missing the mark? And I think it's the Scrum Master's job to point that out. And instead, I've sat in meetings where Scrum Masters were called troublemakers for pointing out problems. So, and I kind of wanted to raise my hand and say, good. Like that's what we should be doing, right? Like granted, you don't want to be a jerk about it, right? And you have to understand there's a delicateness, right, of bringing things up at the right time when, all the things you learn about in coaching. But if we're not pointing out problems in our organizations or on our teams, we're not doing our job. We're not just there to move Jira tickets around, right? We're not there to help people use Jira, honestly. I mean, that can be part of it if the team decides that, but our tools shouldn't define our process. And I feel like that's kind of what Scrum Masters have become that I've seen, is just you sit there and bug people and move tickets around, right?
Yeah, you become a nag or an administrative assistant.
Exactly.
So you mentioned if the team wants to use something like Jira, because I think a lot of times organizations miss that individuals and interactions over processes and tools, and they put the tool before the individuals and interactions. And then you hear these really silly phrases like, this is the way Jira makes us.
Oh my God, if I can't tell you how many times, well, is that an epic or is that a story or is that a task? And I'm like, I don't know. And it doesn't matter, right?
It doesn't matter.
Like, if it only matters because it rolls up into your larger project that you've got a million dashboards for, well, then okay, fine. But, at the end of the day, what does the team need to get their work done? So.
And, you mentioned project managers. And when I got my project management professional, that was kind of the credential at the time when I was working that way. And I remember thinking, well, just because I suffered through a 4-hour, 200-question test doesn't necessarily mean I'm a good project manager. I think there's, other things that go into it, because I know just as many people who have the credential who aren't great project managers.
Right.
And the same is true for the Scrum Alliance credentials, that you and I have both been through.
Right.
I mean, coming through a CSM, it's not intended to say it's the end all be all, because it's kind of like your driver's license. It's like, you're permitted on our streets, go make it happen, because you don't need any experience to get a CSM.
Right.
But the advanced CSM, like you came through, and then certainly the CSP, I guess what I appreciate about the way we've structured that within the Scrum Alliance family of credentials is the CSP is practitioner level. So it's like, okay, prove it.
Right.
yeah, you got some entry level stuff, but now there's experience. And at each point, there's a check-in with an approved educator to say, am I on the right track? Am I being the right level of troublemaker to
Right.
hold these organizations accountable?
Right. And I think that what I've seen too is sometimes people will go ahead and start having the job, and then the organization gets very focused on, okay, well, we need to get everybody a CSM, and we need to get everybody. And they don't even understand that those are those additional levels. And like you said, that it's just essentially it's your driver's license, right? I don't go get to drive a semi truck because I haven't gone through the hundreds of hours that I need of experience to drive that big, huge thing on a road, right? And I think that once you get into the ACSM and the CSP, that's really more like your commercial driver's license, right? It's we know that we're okay with you behind the wheel because we know you're not going to do something bad with this thing that you're you're driving around every day. And I think that I've seen, people just get so focused on, well, everybody needs a CSM, well, everybody needs this. It's like, well, let's take a step back and actually say, that's great if people want to get it and if that's interested to them, but maybe they want to go further than that. Maybe they have been practicing, Scrum and just didn't take the time to do it. Like maybe they should be allowed to go further. People need to understand what those credentials mean and not just look for those abbreviations on a resume, right?
Absolutely.
It's because I've seen a lot of folks that haven't had any experience with any team. I'm about 7 years in at this point, and they say, well, I've got my CSM. And I'm like, okay, so what are the agile principles? Well, what does courage mean to you? What does focus mean to you? Right. And they go, well, what does that have to do with this? And it's like, then we're missing the point. That's how you become a secretary. That's how because you don't know what to do with your day because you're going, you miss the point of it. Right. And so then you just start filling your time with scheduling people's meetings for them. So
yeah, the Scrum value of courage, I think for Scrum Masters is probably the one that's toughest for a lot of people to embrace. And like you said, it doesn't mean you have to be belligerent about your feedback or the way you be that change agent, but it's not, it's not like you whip out your badge and go, agent of change, here I am. But you have to have the courage to challenge the status quo and use, some powerful questions, well, is complacency our goal? Is the status quo our goal? Or we said we wanted to change, we aren't actually changing. What does that look like? Right. I mean, if I say, I want to lose 10 pounds and I engage a coach to do that, and then I'm sitting there eating pizza in front of them every day, then I'm going to get mad when they go, put the pizza down. Right? You said this isn't helping you reach your goal. Screw you. You're supposed to order my pizza for me. You know what I mean? It's kind of odd to me that an organization would spend all the time and money on the credentials and then completely ignore what all of it means or what all of it. And that just maybe lends itself to the companies that are seeing this as big business, and selling anything with the A word or the S word on it.
Absolutely. And I think, especially in the 21st century, especially after COVID, so many companies are realizing the importance of what Agile can do, the Agile mindset can do for them, right? But I think I've even heard it just, well, let's do Agile. Well, how do we do Agile? Well, how do we do? And I'm like, no, it's a state of mind. It's a state of being, right? It's it's an approach. It's not just, again, a checklist. If we do these 15 things, then we are Agile. And I've just seen a lot of Scrum Masters struggle with that, especially the good ones, honestly, because they're in the same boat I am, where we're looking around going, well, none of management's buying into this, and they're expecting me to do something that is essentially just the project manager, but we need to be doing more. We need to be really helping at a grassroots level push up and challenge management. And that does take a lot of courage. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of losing their jobs, which is completely understandable. For me, I've always said, look, I'm challenging you out of respect. I love this company. I'm loyal to this company. I'm loyal to you. And these are the things that I see that we could be better at. These are things that we could do better. This isn't me coming from a perspective of I know better than you. This is let me help you help yourself. Right?
The old Jerry Maguire, help me, help you.
Help you. Exactly. Change looks different to everyone, right? I mean, you go into to one company and what they need to do to get there looks very different than a different company, right? Because they have a different culture, they have different people. It's just the nature of it. And so going to that manager or those folks that are really challenging you on being a change agent, I've just had to say, look, you pay me to do this.
Right.
Like I, personally, we can be best friends if you want and hang out on the weekends. But when I'm here, it's my job to say, are you, like you said, asking those hard questions? Are we really challenging ourselves? Are we just falling back into bad patterns because it's what we're comfortable with? Because no one else above me is willing to have those difficult conversations, right? And I think if you create that environment where difficult conversations are welcome and failure is welcome, then courage isn't difficult because it's become a part of the culture and it's expected.
Yeah. And I don't know if the times are a changing about the whole losing your job. Ken Schwaber used to always say, if you're not getting fired, you're not trying hard enough. Right. So there are times in my Scrum Master career where I tried, tried real hard. But with this whole COVID and people being on lockdown and everything flipping to virtual, oh my gosh, I see people just brazenly quitting jobs over lesser offenses than, hey, Scrum Master, be the secretary. These leaders who have said, you will come back into the office. Nope, not going to do it. I quit. There's so many jobs right now because I think we're just seeing kind of this whole upheaval. And so I think that some organizations, their leaders are going to have to rethink things regardless, or they're not going to be able to hire because people won't put up with it.
No. And I think, people, it's called the Great Resignation. Isn't that the title of it? And I think it's really workers being able, and people doing the jobs really being able to push back, particularly in, knowledge worker and software development, which is where I am. People really saying, no, I actually understand what this is supposed to look like. I'm trying to help get the company there because that's the best thing for me and the team and the company, right? And for our customers. And those that don't get on board are just going to be left behind because all the good people, frankly, are going to go to those companies that support them in doing this the right way. And the beauty of Agile is, once you get in the right mindset, it's a flywheel. You keep getting better and better and better, and then you get further and further ahead of your competition because the amount of growth that it allows for. So it will definitely be interesting to see in 5 years or so what companies really did it wrong, right? Or didn't, or bought into that Silicon Valley idea of what Agile looks like or product development looks like, because I want to be the next Steve Jobs, right? So I think once we see those companies really shake out into what their culture really is and what they really are supporting, it will be interesting to see who's still left.
Kind of wishing there was like a different word, they the people who coined the term Agile argued over many other things that they were going to call it. They were going to call it light. They were going to call it adaptive. So a lot of the original authors or people who were involved in the movement at that time have stopped saying Agile because of what it's become, and they will say adaptive. So wouldn't it be great if the organizations that were really pivoting, really turning on a dime for a dime, just started calling it adaptive or even something else? And so bastardized Agile can be what it is. It can be this weird, oh yeah, you want to just give lip service to it. You want to pay a company to feel safe.
I have Jira.
Right. And we're doing these other things.
Right.
And well, what is it? Well, what is it called? So we could come up with something totally new.
Exactly. Instead of being like, not that, right? That's the name of it. Not what they're doing. That's not it at all. I can imagine being frustrated if I was one of the original founders with how many companies just say, well, we're doing that. We're Agile. We're moving along. And then you're sitting there in these meetings where nobody's talking to customers. No one's spoken to a customer. Well, I know better than the customer does, right? Again, everybody trying to be the next Steve Jobs. Sorry, folks, you probably aren't. So why don't you go talk to the person actually using your product and surround yourself with people that will challenge you.
Voting with their feet. I can't even tell you. I mean, we pulled so much money out of a very large bank that I won't name, but they couldn't hit water if they fell out of a boat. And that by the time they were interested in talking to me, the damage was done, and they just don't care about how they treat their customers on a daily basis. And then when I did talk to somebody and told them, they were horrified. They were like, and they're like, well, what can we do about it? I'm like, you tell me.
Yeah.
You tell me what you're going to do about it. Never heard from them again.
Of course.
And it's like, and then, so, the day I was in there withdrawing all of our money, it was a very, very, very large sum because it was for the business.
Mhm.
And not one person asked me why I was making the withdrawal and closing the account. Not one. So it's like, all right, so you're endorsing me voting with my feet. Yet that same company sends numerous people to our public classes, and then they, proudly declare that they're agile. And I'm like,
right.
You're not even nimble.
Talk to any of us. Yeah. And it's hard, right? I mean, nobody likes to be wrong. And I think that when you talk to customers, you're going to realize that you're wrong. And even as Scrum Masters, it's scary, right? Like you're supposed to be helping coach a team, and you might get feedback that you're not doing a great job. Right. And because we talked about earlier in our careers, me going in and telling everybody what to do because I knew best. Well, now I'm just horrified by that.
Yep.
And I wish I had somebody go, what are you talking about? Like, don't come and tell us. That's the opposite of what your role is. Right. But it's hard. It's hard to get that feedback. It makes you uncomfortable. It's just like a good retrospective. It's kind of uncomfortable on a team, and it should be. And, I've talked to you about self-retrospectives, and I try to do that. I try to do that every once in a while too, having been in a culture before, where I was really one of the only Scrum Masters. Granted, there were a few folks with CSMs, but I don't even know honestly what they were doing. But I had to sit there and take a look at myself and say, is what I'm doing part of the culture? Is what I'm doing actually being a Scrum Master, right? Or have I let this toxic anti-agile culture permeate where I'm fine sitting there and scheduling meetings, or that I'm thinking about things in terms of Jira epics, or I'm thinking about things in terms of how to report on dates and push the team for when we can get things done. And how many times have I talked to a customer, right? And I think that it's good to take a step back and say, kind of like you're saying with voting with your feet, if you're not a person and you're not doing your job the way you like to do it, and you're not proud to say, I'm doing a great job as a Scrum Master, maybe it's time to take a look at that and say, is that me? Am I just having a rough year? Because I think we can all say we probably were not all at our best over this past, 16, 18 months, or is it that the culture is really preventing me from doing the job I need to do, right? And at that point you go, okay, well, now I got to get out of here, because now I'm sacrificing my own values, which align with the, Scrum values and Agile values, and really saying, okay, I think it's time, to move on and to find a place that will support me in doing this the way that I know it needs to do it.
That is some great advice for our followers who are Scrum Masters. It's like, check yourself, right? Little self-retrospective time, little self-reflection.
And it's been sad. There's been times I've had if we're looking at the board of what's going well and what's not going well, my not going well column was significantly longer than going well, and that's where you got to think hard is, am I just being lazy? Have I not pushed myself? Have I not, read enough and been influenced enough and talked to the team enough? Or is it just, like we said, I'm working in a culture that doesn't actually really value what the real benefit of a Scrum Master is?
Yeah. And sometimes I think Scrum Masters need to be okay with getting back to the basics, because there are so many people who are Scrum Masters, or they call themselves Scrum Masters, who have allowed themselves not just to be institutionalized in the way you mentioned about becoming an administrative assistant, but all of a sudden they want to be an Agile coach, because that's a hierarchy. That's a step up, right? And it's like, not really, because the Scrum Master is the coach to the developers, the product owner, and the organization. An Agile coach would be temporary. If you had somebody who didn't understand how to do the job, or you were looking at a different Agile method. But ideally, an Agile coach is temporary, because you wouldn't be needed if you were successful.
You should be putting yourself out of business if you're an Agile coach, right? You shouldn't
be
needed anymore.
Sustaining their own agility, because why would we need to add more people to do work in a new way that's supposed to be more efficient? That doesn't go together. No. And then you get pushback, or I do anyway, from the people calling themselves that, well, I need to earn a living. I need 40 hours a week. I need to bill. Well, then those two things don't go together.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So the term agile coach has become just as subverted, if not more bastardized, along with all of it. And so I think what's wrong with calling yourself a Scrum Master?
Yeah.
And then,
and that's the whole problem, I think, with the way, like I mentioned earlier, about corporations wanting to keep the status quo. Well, that includes hierarchy, right? We're told that your natural progression as a person, especially as a woman, that you're not successful until you become a people manager. And then you're not as successful if you're not a director or a vice president. And I think it's okay to say sometimes people have reached what they want to reach, and shouldn't matter what that title is, right? I mean, if you look at influence and sphere of influence, a Scrum Master has a massive sphere of influence.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe more so than your VP that sits in the office and doesn't really talk to anybody every day. I mean, he or she can go make a big decision, but that doesn't mean that they're actually interacting and impacting people's lives every day, right? So I think that it shouldn't matter about title. If coaching, which it is a part of being a Scrum Master, then call yourself a Scrum Master, and you don't need to be an advanced Scrum Master, and you don't need, like I've seen that title, or Senior Scrum Master. It's great.
Senior Scrum Master is the one I'm seeing lately.
Yeah. So if we want to give people the recognition of the fact that they've been doing it for a long time and they're very good, well then great. Well then pay them more.
Right.
Right. But and show your recognition and your appreciation through pay. But it doesn't matter if you're a senior or an advanced or a super princess cupcake Scrum Master, right? We should all be doing the same job, and we should all be working within our own sphere of influence. But it's because of the status quo of the hierarchy, right? People want a better title, a bigger title, and it's because we're not appreciating what a Scrum Master actually does.
I encourage people at this organization to just pick their own title, because I don't really care. And that horrifies some people. And the spirit of it is, I want you empowered to call yourself whatever gets you through the barrier of who you're talking to. Mm-hmm. So if you're talking to somebody who doesn't speak Scrum, but they only interpret things in terms of the traditional hierarchy, if calling yourself director gets you over whatever the objection or the hurdle is, I don't care. I call myself Chief Change Officer. And somebody actually put it on a contract recently. So they just went and looked on LinkedIn because they weren't sure what to call me, like for the signature line. And I just laughed. I'm like, oh, that's awesome that they took it that seriously.
Well, I would call myself the Scrum Overlord, because I think that would actually convince everyone that I knew that I was talking about. So, but and require a throne and a robe. But I've seen that though, where and I think that goes back to our main discussion was what's wrong with Scrum Mastery today is we are undervaluing that position. Because if you see a Scrum Master just essentially as a glorified personal assistant, it's why wouldn't you want to grow from that or move from that, right? Because you don't understand that it's so much more than that, and it encompasses coaching and training and leadership and influence and customer awareness. It encompasses all of that. But if you're just relegating somebody to being a JIRA administrator, then yeah, people are going to want to be a senior Scrum Master if that gets them out of just being a JIRA administrator.
Yeah, and that commitment to continuous improvement, not just for the people you're serving, the developers, the product owner, and the organization, but for yourselves. Because if we're not enthused about the basics, how can we teach other people? If we aren't committed to staying current, because the Scrum Guide changes. I mean, that would be really hypocritical to say, oh, continuous improvement for everybody else, but not us. Right. So I run into so many people who have that CSM, from like 8 years ago or 6 years ago. And I'll, point out, that changed back in 2013, or, that changed back in 2017. What? The Scrum Guide changes? Or this stuff, right. Yes. So it's also staying current, and doing that self-reflection like you're talking about, and then a lot of these things don't cost money. I mean, you can belong to free user groups, and with all this stuff flipping to virtual, that has never been easier.
Oh yeah.
to join other people's user groups or to stay current and talk to other authors or other Scrum Masters. Are there any that you find keep you grounded as a Scrum Master, or any books that you've picked up lately that you're like, this is what's keeping me going?
So I'm a little late to the party, but I recently picked up Radical Candor, and that has been helpful for me in terms of how to tell the truth without hurting people's feelings or without having too much empathy, right? Because sometimes we won't be totally honest about the change that needs to happen because we're empathizing with the person we're talking to. So that's really helped me kind of reflect on my own approach to coaching. The Scrum Alliance actually has some great coaching videos right now on their website that I've been going through as well for some of my SEUs. And that's been really helpful because it just goes through what coaching is, that it's not about you, right? It should never be about you. It's you helping that person be the best version of themselves. It's not about me feeling successful because I've coached you, Angela, and now you're going off and making a lot of money, right? Like that's not my success. It's I help you find your success. So that I'm constantly buying new books. Reading new things. There's a lot of books actually that you recommended in your class that I've got on my shelf that I'm getting next to that I'm pulling up next. But also the one thing I would say is where I work right now, we do have a really good community of Scrum Masters. There are a number of us, and that is actually our title. And so I just recently joined that company, but I've already become a part of their Agile fundamentals group, where they're trying to improve give toolkits to Scrum Masters, especially new ones at the company, as to things that they can do, how to be successful, who to reach out to. So really just talking to people is how I stay grounded. What's going on with you? What are you seeing? What book are you reading? What blog are you looking at? And just staying a part of the community. Previously, I've worked places where I wasn't a part of a community and I just felt lost, right?
Yeah.
I felt like the struggles I was going through, I'm the only one in the entire world that's ever gone through it. Probably not true, right? Like I'm special, but I'm not that special. So odds are somebody else somewhere has experienced it. And, staying a part of those communities, listening to podcasts, finding resources online, it's a really good way to just remember again what the purpose of your role is and to not get lost with all of the fluff that may otherwise be expected of you.
I think that's what a couple of you were going through in the CSP. You were like, oh my gosh, there's other people like me. And it was kind of like turning into a Scrum Master support group there really for a little bit.
Maybe we should start those actually after this. Like, I could start a Seattle area support group for maligned or scorned Scrum Masters.
Scorned Scrum Master. That would make a great acronym. We could have SSM.
Exactly. There's, what is it? Hell hath no wrath like a scorned Scrum Master.
Nice. That would be a great meme too. Come up with that meme. Well, awesome. So to bring it all home, our advice here for Scrum Masters who may be going, okay, so what do I do? Stay current, self-reflection, if you call that self-retrospective. Anything else?
I think continue to fight for your courage, right? Like even if you have to put post-it notes on your computer, on your monitor, just be willing to be the person to say what needs to be said, regardless of the situation you're in, right? And as we talked about, if that culture doesn't accept that and doesn't like that, well, okay, then they're not ready, right? And maybe that isn't the place for you because you want to be somewhere where you are allowed to be that change agent and be who you really are and do the best thing for your team and for the company. So I think really focusing on being courageous, and then realize things take time. That's hard for me. I'm somebody that likes things done. I'm a recovering, as you talk about, project manager. So it's hard to sit back and say, I know how this needs to be fixed, or I have an idea how this could be fixed. I have an idea how I can coach people through this, but it's going to take time, because just like it took me 7 years, when I think about myself as a baby Scrum Master to where I am today, it took me 7 years to get there, right? And it's not fair to expect those folks that are around you to be able to change on a dime just because you think it should happen. So I had a retrospective earlier today, actually, where people were pushing for things. And I said, guys, like, you can't build Rome in a day. Let's start small. let's check in 2 weeks and see where we are. Right. And they were like, oh yeah,
Nice.
that's a really good idea. But it takes conscious effort on my part not to be like, okay, let's just, throw everything out the window and start over. So I think just remembering and being gracious to yourself and your team that change takes time, and that's okay. And really that's where the journey of it is, where the beauty lies, right? Because you never actually get there.
It's not a
right?
destination.
It's not, it's the journey. Yeah. So be kind to yourself, be kind to your team, and yeah, just give yourself that space to take as much time as it needs to take.
Nice. Well, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Awesome.